Kind of grace, Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this day, Lord. We just thank you for all your blessings, Lord. We thank you for the moisture that you've given us, Lord. Father, just ask that you just be with us tonight, Lord. We oversee your business, Lord. Grant us wisdom and discernment. Lord, we just give you all the praise and glory for some Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Janine, is there anybody for public comments?
No, sir.
Mitch, any new city employees?
Not here.
Do we have any?
Yes. Collins, what's his first name? Working out at Landfill. And he is not here.
Okay. Next, we'll consider and approve the minutes from the April 25th and May 11th meetings. If there's no additions or corrections, can we get a motion to approve the minutes as read?
I make a motion we approve the minutes as read.
Motion's been made by Michael, seconded by Kenny. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Next, we'll consider and approve the monthly departmental reports. We have a question, please identify the page. Starting in the police reports, page 9 and page 11, and page 14. I just wanted to commend Ross and the PD. It looks like y'all have been busy, lots of arrests and lots of citations. And, the letter in here you'll see on page 14 was his letter of commendation to several of his officers for they solved both homicides and have submitted those to grand jury, I guess is the process. So thank you for all y'all's hard work.
My folks.
Any other questions? All right, can we get a motion to approve the monthly departmental reports?
Make a motion we approve the monthly departmental reports.
Second.
Motion's been made by Kenny, seconded by Michael. Is there any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next, we'll consider and approve April expenses beginning on page 55. If you have a question, please identify the page. If there's no questions on the monthly expenses, can we get a motion to approve the expenses?
I make a motion we approve the April expenses.
Second.
Motion's been made by Michael, seconded by Kenny. If there's no further questions, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Next, you will consider and approve the always towing expenses. That begins on page 71. Can you get a motion to approve those expenses?
So this vehicle was stolen, is that correct, Travis?
That was a trailer, right? That was stolen, that we had towed.
Which one is?
On, always stolen bill, that was a trailer that y'all located, stolen out of them,
Yes, sir, it was stolen.
and they had to tow it.
Yes, sir. That was the
Danger of
deal,
being stolen again, I think.
that was the deal that we had other calls backing up on. We had to get the trailer out of the neighborhood away from a possible subject. That was why it was towed.
Okay. Make a motion we approve the always towing expenses.
Second.
Motion's been made by Kenny, seconded by Michael. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion carries. Next, we'll consider and approve an appointment of a mayor pro tem for this year. Y'all two are present, so y'all decide.
But I make a motion we keep Mr. Rucker as mayor pro tem.
I'll second that. Motion's been made by Michael, seconded by Eric, that we approve the appointment of Kenny as the mayor pro tem for this year. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Next, we will consider and approve a resolution waiving the permit fees for Littlefield ISD bond project. Mitch?
I put this on there for your consideration. I've asked some different communities, I sent out like email to 60 city managers, and I got 3 responses back. One community waives them, I get Horseshoe Canyon does not waive them. And then Plainview was one that responded and said they waive permit fees, but they charge a plan review fee, and I don't know how much that is. But some cities do it, some don't, and there's arguments either way. So I wanted to get in front of you guys to consider waiving it.
He brought this before us because he's not allowed to waive a permit fee, so it had to come to the council. Eric's not here tonight. He had called asking about this, and once we visited about it, he expressed his disinterest in doing it. But my position on it is I think that everybody's supportive of the school. We are, but if we waive the fee, the way I look at it is one taxing entity is subsidizing another taxing entity. We have time in this. It's a big project. There's going to be multiple dozens and dozens of inspections. Luckily we have staff, Marshall and Mitch, that can do a lot of these inspections. But like a few years ago when we were talking about having to hire a company, a consultant to do inspections, it would cost us $300 to $400 to do an inspection, and that would be money out of our pocket. We have the staff, but there's still a time required. And my position is if we're going to waive the fees for the school, what about when the hotel guy comes in and wants to build a $5 million hotel, or somebody wants to come build a restaurant, or spec houses, or something else to improve the community that actually produces jobs and things like that. The school does too, but we don't waive those fees. So either we charge fees to everybody or we don't charge any at all, is what is my position on it. I want to help the school, but on the other end this is part of the cost of the project.
Before we go any further, I don't know if I need to abstain from this one since I'm an employee from the school.
Probably be to your benefit. I don't know if you should.
I think, Janine, if you have a quorum and somebody abstains, then 2 is enough to approve.
I'm going to take a brief recess and I'm going to call our attorneys and the question.
If you have two newly elected people and that's all that's in the quorum, you can do that. I'm not sure you can do it as far as this ordinance goes.
I don't think you have to, I'm just trying to recall, I don't think you have to have a quorum approving something, but you can have a quorum, you have to have a quorum to convene. But if somebody, they've already paid it, so we'd be refunded it. We'll recess it.
We could take, probably vote on it, but it gives them some heartburn. So Eric's on his way. And if he shows up, we'll pick this back up. If he doesn't, we'll take it another time. So we can discuss it, but like Michael, you can't discuss and vote on it. So we just don't feel comfortable with doing it on it too. So, next we will consider and approve a transfer of the original town Littlefield Block 9, Lot 12 at 801 West 3rd Street to Littlefield ISD. Mitch?
We've had this property ownership, I think this is one of the first properties we seized for taxes, and one of the first properties we demolished back 5 years ago, and, actually 6 years ago. And, it's in pretty close proximity to the school, and all along we kind of thought about maybe, the school having it. They'd have a, interest in keeping it nice and clean, and frankly, I'm tired of mowing it. So, I called the county and they said they would also be in favor of signing it over to the school, if we, wanted to do that. And the school has kind of an overall project to kind of, property comes available close to the school. They like to try to acquire that property. And we spent $3,500 of that, to demolish the property, and just kind of a reminder that the school and the county both allow us to keep all of the money from seizure properties, and it goes into what we call the fly elimination fund, and we pay for some of our demolitions out of that. And so I recommend that we have it.
Back to the same issue. Hold off on this one. Hold off on the next one. So we're gonna go to 14. We're gonna consider and approve a memorandum of understanding with the Littlefield Methodist Church for parking for the Aquatic Center patrons.
Yes, I apologize. I hit the wrong file to, I'm sorry. On this lease with the pool, for the parking lot, we're, several months we've been working on this thing off and on, and I think we're happy with the wording and asking for approval of the MOU. It's just basically following the handshake agreement we have with the church, and kind of held off on any kind of maintenance or any kind of work on that parking lot for us to use it until we got something in writing. So all we really plan to do maybe is smooth over that parking lot, maybe fill in some spots just to offset them allowing us to use it. The building a new parking lot, I think, would be probably a waste of money to expand our parking lot when we can share that parking lot with the church.
This kind of goes in with the agreement that's been in place since the beginning, just puts it in writing. We're not gonna do any improvements to their parking lot, we're just maintaining it.
Right, I made sure that they knew that, although it does say, this talks about several things we can do, but when it gets right down to it, if we don't agree to do it, we don't have to do something that the church may want us to do. But it does allow us to do all kinds of stuff like asphalt, striping and things, but we would have to get permission from them to do it, and I just don't see a whole lot of improvements other than wheel stops and maybe a little bit of grading is about it.
Entertain a motion to approve this memorandum of understanding.
I make a motion that we approve this memorandum of understanding with the Littlefield Methodist Church for our parking for the aquatic center.
Motion been made by Michael, seconded by Kenny. Any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion carries. Next, we'll consider and approve change order for the annual seal coat resurface.
This is actually good news. We'd estimated $4 a yard for doing the chip seal this year, and so we put 187,000 yards in the bid packet, and when the bids came in about 50 cents lower, that allowed us to increase our coverage about 10, 11,000 yards. And I've been working on, with a budget of 700,000, I've spent some of that in hot mix repairs and to get in preparation for this seal coat project. And so I just asked to change all of that up from 170 yards to go to 198 yards, or 98,000 yards.
I want to draw y'all's attention to page 110. So these are the people, the cities that are in the group seal coat program.
Yeah.
You notice a lot of 20,000 square yards. Porter's a big project, and Hereford, 70, 86,000. Seminole's big, 92,000. But many on this list are down around 20,000 square yards, and then Littlefield's 100, and what now is 198,000 yards. So we're double, 2.5 times, quadruple some of these. But so just goes to show how serious we've been on the streets when compared with other cities. Make a motion, we approve a change order request for increasing the square yardage of this chip seal program.
Second.
Motion's been made by Eric, seconded by Michael. Is there any other questions? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carried. Oh, see if they're good here for that. Well, we'll go ahead and do consider and review plans regarding utility infrastructure and discuss financing options.
Okay. I have a multimedia presentation. Multiple people.
I'll get your deal up on the slides.
Yeah, let's see. Hey Brad, hold on just a second, let me get you on, got lots of technology here. That should be getting you up there.
Battery, hi. Connector here.
Say something. Hold on just a second. Connected. Should be. Okay. Got that.
Brad, are you there?
This was supposed to be the easy part.
All right, are you there, Brad?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I now have the presentation on the TV. And I haven't said anything yet, so kind of get started with this thing. We've had some discussions on not a lot at council, but some discussions on water needs for the future and some infrastructure things. And we've asked Brad to ask our financial advisor, particularly toward bonds. We've asked him to kind of take a look at what a bond would cost to tackle some of these bigger projects for water and wastewater. And the biggies we have is 3 million gallon ground storage tank and a couple of new water wells to add our water production capacity. And we've got a couple of lift stations that we need to be looking at, and then a dedicated loop water line out to the milk plant. And I've got a chart here that Brad's looked at. It's in your packet on page 113, and it kind of describes the different things we're looking at. And if you look at that fourth column, the funding, I think the first two would be probably a pretty good bond package. It would be right close to $4 million. So I've asked Brad to kind of analyze where we're at and what kind of capacity we would have for funding some big projects like this going forward.
So before we begin that, Brad, so why would we not include the lift station stuff in here?
Well, I thought you was talking to Brad. The main lift station is something that we've applied for a grant. And matter of fact, Brad and I were talking about that earlier, would be to just have 4 million plus another 400,000 to 500,000 for a lift station. And if we don't get our grant for our main lift station, then we could do the main lift station. But if we do get the grant, we could do the Laguna lift station. And the city's applied for grants for the Laguna lift station in the past, actually before I came, one of them, and it did not get funded because it wasn't really covering the whole town. It's covering part of the town, and I don't understand all the mechanics behind it. But long story short, that would be a good thing to include in the bond, would be a main lift station or a lift station. I think you have to be specific on which one you're going to do.
And so you're expecting we'll get a grant for one of the lift stations?
I think we got categorically eliminated last time we applied for a lift station, and that was because we had another grant that was open at the time. We wanted to talk that, I guess, so we got eliminated.
Brad, can we write a grant, or can we write a bond that, is $4 million for these projects and another $1 million for lift stations, draw on the first $4 million and don't take the last of $1 million if we get the grant?
That's a little different product than is available here in the market currently. And mayor and council, for the record, Luke Stradang, has served as the city's financial advisor with Stiefel Public Finance. Mayor, there are still some bank options. What you described is a drawdown loan, construction type loan. Banks we've found here for the last couple of years, and really more so here the last 3 to 6 months, have tightened up quite a bit as far as what they're providing in lending to municipalities and government type issuers. And that's partly because of the rise in interest rates and their ability to get some higher interest rates out there from whether it be oil and gas or other type of commercial activities. But that's certainly something we can explore, go out, to talk to some banks about, but I'm not seeing much of that type of product here over the last 6 months, sir.
Sure. All right, that was my only question.
So I guess we'll run through this handout, and I've handed them the minute just printed off that you sent just a couple hours ago. And I've got it on the big screen TV, so I can zoom in or go page to page, however we need to do that.
Okay, excellent. Good. Well, thanks again for the chance here to talk with all this evening. As Mr. Grant alluded to, we're starting to just take a look at, what is the city's funding options for some of these projects that you'll have here, and some of the needs that you have. And so we've taken a look not only at your financing capacity and your ability to potentially issue a debt obligation, whether it be a bond or a bank loan or a different type of governmental lending, but we've also just taken a look at your cash levels. The city's done pretty well here for the last couple of years of increasing your fund balance, and then also they've already, Mitch and the city staff's already looking at some grant options. But let me take you through our presentation, and I'll give you a quick summary of what your current debt profile looks like as far as your loans and bonds that you have outstanding, and take a look at your valuations and tax base, and then I'll walk you through some of the analysis we did. Mitch, if you could move us to page 4, please. And this is the tax base overview of the city, and so this is where we start with our evaluation. Of course, your taxable assessed valuation is there on the left-hand side. That's the value of all the property within the city limits. We did just get some preliminary numbers for next fiscal year as far as the taxable assessed valuation from the CAD, the Central Appraisal District. Their preliminary numbers they're looking at is $214 million, so another big jump in the tax base that is probably coming for next budget cycle. In the middle section there is your tax rate history, and so your total tax rate in the city is made up of 2 components. You have your M&O, your maintenance and operation portion, that pays for all the operational aspects of city government, and then that INS rate, the second portion, that stands for interest and sinking. And what that is your debt service. That's the amount that is collected to pay off financing for some of your infrastructure projects over the years. And so over the last several years, as you're probably aware, the city has reduced the tax rate quite a bit. Back in 2019, it was at 75 cents. Here this year that you're currently operating under a tax rate of 62 cents. And I point that out because we always, when we look at financing options for you, which I'll show you here in a few minutes, we always try and do our calculations without a tax rate increase. And so I know y'all aren't quite to that part of your decision making, but the analysis that we've been working on, we try and keep that steady or get lower. So I did just want to point that out. Moving on to page 5, this is a look at the current debt obligations that you have outstanding. And so you have 2 bonds. One was from 2020 that was part of the had to do with the swimming pool, and the portion that was not grant funded. And then back in 2006, you had a Texas Water Development Board loan, is what that second item. And so together they make up the payments that you can make on an annual basis. So they're on the bottom half of this slide. Those bars represent the amount of your payments this year and moving forward through 2036. And so you'll see that they start to reduce here in 25, there's a little reduction. There's a larger reduction after going from 27 to 28. And then you finish, your final payment is there in 2036. And then the yellow line, that shows the projected INS rate or debt service rate that's needed to bring in the revenue to pay that. You'll notice, I'll point out at least, that that yellow line is starting to decline even into next year. And that's based off of the current assessed valuation. So the way that INS rate or tax rate is established is we multiply that against your taxable assessed value, again, the property value within the city limits, and we calculate the amount that's needed to pay for that. So that's, we anticipate that to go down here next year as things stand. I'm going to move over to slide 7 now. We could recap what we currently have. So as we think about, we don't get secure financing if it comes to that point. That's what you need for your projects. But really there's 3 different areas that municipalities and cities in Texas look to fund your projects and infrastructure. Of course, first off, you can always use some of your cash, which is also what we call the unassigned fund balance. And that can be appropriate at times once you get a sufficient balance. I have a few items I want to go through here. We recommend a city of the size of Littlefield, really that you try and target and grow your fund balance to be about 50% of your annual budget. That's a goal or a target, and that's an amount that can help a city of your size withstand maybe a catastrophic event. If there's big project, or perhaps the water system goes down. It's an amount that's established not only in a norm in our industry, but the rating agencies like to see that amount. I recommend amounts that that high. The GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association. So that's the target we like to look at and try and obtain. You all are pretty close to it. Based off the end of last year, your 3.6 million of fund balance was approximately 45%. So you all are at a good, healthy level. As far as a minimum, we like you to always have at least 3 months, or about 25% of your annual budget available to you. So somewhere between that 25 to 50% is a healthy range. As you approach that 50%, it's not uncommon for cities to use a little bit of that cash for their projects. And so we looked at that, and based on your current fund balance and cash position, it wouldn't be out of the, it would be appropriate if y'all decided you wanted to use maybe $1 million and half of that in order to help fund some of your projects and reduce your need for financing. So, the flip side of that, as mentioned, I've been discussing, is interest rates and investment rates are actually up for the first time. Probably 10 years, you're actually making some money on your investment earnings. So if you do use some of that cash, it's gonna take away from some of your investment earnings that you may obtain over the coming period. So just something you'll have to think about and weigh what the appropriate amount is, if any, that you may want to use of your cash. Grant funding. We talked about grant funding a little bit. Mitch talked about it on the front end. He's already applied for a community development block grant. Grant money is great. It's, it's the cheapest funding option that we can find. It does come with quite a bit of lead time. Of course, you got to write the grant, the applications, et cetera. You have to make sure you're within their time frame schedules. But if you have an immediate need, sometimes grants aren't the best, but if it's a project that you can get in front of and you don't have that timeline that you need to move on, that's certainly a good option to go. Lastly, what I specialize in, once you get to the spot, you determine if you do want to do some financing and take care of these projects today. Financing options available to municipalities include bonds, of course. You can do GO bonds, GO bonds, or revenue bonds. Those are backed either by property taxes or revenues coming off your enterprise system. Bank loans are structured very much the same way, but instead of selling your bonds to multiple investors out on the capital markets, we work with one investor in a bank, and so they get a chance to kind of structure that as well. And then government lenders, like the Texas Water Development Board, USDA provides some options as well. These are all different avenues that we explore. Those bonds and financing, of course, there is a little bit of a benefit here for municipalities, governments, and nonprofits. You have access to tax-exempt borrowing rates, which are typically about 2/3 of what a taxable rate might be. So even though you may see 6-7% on a home mortgage today for a 30-year home mortgage, the tax-exempt government borrowing rates are still down near 4%. So still pretty good options and low cost of capital. It's still very much below historical averages. So we did some analysis, and I can show you those details here in the next few pages, but we wanted to look at what could the city tap into or finance today, what amount could you finance today without a tax rate increase. And what we found is that you can get approximately $500,000 to $1.5 million this year to about 3.9 to 4 million over the next 2 years. And that's there's a range there because it does depend on your timing. You have some room this year, depending on where these final valuations come in, to do some projects, and then depending on where that tax rate falls. And then, if you walk, and so that's doing like a property tax-backed bond, what we call a certificate of obligation or a GO bond. On the other avenue that you have is the revenue bond. And so we just wanted to give you an idea of what that type of repayment would be. So if you did a $3 million revenue bond, that annual payment, if you borrowed money for about 15 years, would be $350,000. And so whether you repay that with property tax or revenue, we can make those decisions. But if you did decide to do, use your revenues from your water and sewer system, most likely be looking about a 10% increase in the revenue that you'd have to pull off that system and potentially to rates on that, those increases. So that's the summary. I'm going to move on to page 8. Well, perhaps before I dive into these numbers, I don't know if there's any questions to this point.
So, I guess I'm a little confused on 3.9 million over 2 years. That means over the next 2 years, we're gonna be capable of borrowing that?
Yes, sir. That means, depending on what you did this year, it means you could do approximately $1 million this year and $2 million next year. Or you could do $1.5 million this year to $1.5 million the following year. It just so the most you could do this year without if you did it on the property tax side without a tax rate increase is about 1.5 million in financing.
But if we were to raise the revenues of that enterprise fund 10%, 15%, then we could finance the project.
You could do it all at once if you did that, or if you blended the two structures. That certificate of obligation debt product actually allows you to use part property tax and part revenues if you chose to.
What's the product if you want to stay away from a tax increase and just go off of enterprise revenue?
You can still, the certificate of obligation is your best bet, even if you used 100% enterprise revenues. And the reason is because it, even though you're using all that enterprise revenue, it has a backup. It's kind of what we call a double barrel pledge as a backup of property tax, and so you're able to lock in lower interest rates. So even though you're only using enterprise revenues, it would get a lower interest rate than a straight revenue bond.
Any other questions from anybody?
I know it's kind of early, but typically right now, what would, what would the interest rate, you're kind of seeing what would that?
He's got some cost of monies on the back part of the deal. 2.5. What would your, what was the rate be on a CO bond at this point? Was the
Yeah,
question?
we looked at some pretty short-term options, 12, 13 years. I know y'all like to try and keep it shorter and pay it off quicker. Interest rates are approximately 3.5%.
That's on a certificate of obligation.
You can continue, Brad.
Okay. So on page 8, I was just going to show you all some of the math behind this. I'll just point out a couple things that I want to, hopefully help put you at ease. You'll see there in the middle of the page up top, I've got a orange box around the existing tax rates. On the top line, 2023, that's your existing, that's today's total tax rate at the 197 million. And so at 214, as you start to grow your tax base, if you keep your tax rate the same, it produces additional revenue. Now, I'm fully aware, I know on the no side, you all are capped at 3.5%. That's been factored into here, so I just want to assure y'all that's been considered. But if you look over on the right-hand side at future capacity, that's the amount of revenue we project is going to be available for debt service moving forward if you were to maintain the current tax rate. So you can see it starts to grow a little bit in 24, and then it gets larger in 25, in development, and even more so when you get about 5 years out. Because there's only 77,000 approximately next year, that's why I made the statement that you only had capacity for about 1.5 million this year without a tax rate increase. This analysis is just based on property tax. So if you all, work through this and you decide, well, let's try and keep this on our water enterprise system, that's, we can show some blended options at a later date. So just a starting point for consideration here.
Also might add that keeping the same rate is considered a tax increase because when the valuation goes up, then you bring in more revenue, and you have to do public notices and things that you're increasing taxes when you're not. You're just keeping the same rate.
But this would not trigger
Right.
an election.
Yeah.
This scenario.
It changes every year. I figured we'll go through 10 more changes in the next 5 years.
That's the truth. So that's how we get to the projections that we're showing you. If you flip to page 9, again, this is just looking at those same numbers that I just showed you, but on a bar chart basis here. So on page 9, down in the bottom left, the dark blue lines, that's your current debt payments for your existing bonds. And so what we do is we look at, well, if y'all grow at your historical rates, growth rates about 2.5%, 3%, and you keep that tax rate steady, the amount between that line and your existing portfolio, existing debt payments, that's what we consider potential capacity that can be used for your projects without a tax rate increase. So just a graphical look. This goes out 20 years, so it's quite a bit further than we typically look at for you all, but just wanted to give y'all an idea of what the future holds as far as your ability to tackle some of the projects that you may have. In page 10, there's a lot of details here, but this is the results based off those different levels. I've highlighted what I feel are kind of the most important items, which they're in orange. So this left-hand column that's titled Maintaining Current Total Tax Rate, that's the one that keeps your tax rate the same as it is, the 62 cents that you've dropped to over the last 5 years. That would allow you to do about 1.5, 1.6 projects without a tax rate increase. And then just to the right of it, it's titled Current INS Rate. That leaves the debt service side alone, and it brings in a little bit smaller number, about 500,000 in projects. So that is your range of projects you can do this year on the property tax side without an increase. The actual amount will be determined when the assessed valuation gets a little more locked in by the CAD, and also as you all make your way through your budget process and what type of adopted tax rate you may be working with next year. So that's it. I think that, again, summary slide there on page 7, I hope gives you the parameters that we're looking at. I think you do have some options here available to you to get at some of these projects. Between your cash available and some of the property tax growth that could be tapped into, and potentially even added revenue from the water system. You really have capacity to probably take on 2.5 to 3.5 million of projects. If not this year, I think we certainly believe that you have that capacity next year to get that done.
And with increase in enterprise revenue, I mean, that's just all, it's directly proportional to the amount of increase to the amount of borrowing rate, is that correct?
That is correct. It's depending on how much of the project you want to be funded by the enterprise revenue in that system, you're going to need to increase those rates a little bit to bring in that extra revenue. So the 2.5 to 3.5 that I came up with, sir, $1 million of cash. You could do $1.5 million of property tax bonds without a property tax rate increase. And then if you all did decide you wanted to take on all the projects or the 3 to 4 million of projects, you'd be looking at potentially some additional revenues needed from the water and sewer system.
And so you said a 10% increase in our water sewer revenue, and so it's not as simple as, we have a base rate built into our bill that's higher, and then the consumption portion of it, $3.50 per thousand. It's not as simple as saying a 10% increase in consumption of $3.50 per thousand. It's the total dollar. So if the average household has a $100 bill, it's not as simple as just saying it's 10. We can't just look at the gallons of an increase. I mean, it's going to be a higher usage increase because we have to generate that revenue from the base rate.
That's right, sir. That's why I denoted on the slide to revenues. Every city's rate schedule is different, whether for your homeowners and payers versus commercial and payers. So how that shakes out for your particular system would have to be looked at closer.
Okay. You want to keep them on the line and talk about the projects and we'll cover the financing. I don't have any other questions for that at this point.
Okay. Yeah, you want to stay on the line, Brad, or do you need to?
Want to
Yeah,
talk- I mean,
Yeah, I'll listen in here for a little bit and be available if something comes up.
okay.
But these are big number, they're big rocks in the jar, and that 3 million gallon storage tank would give us some a little more cushion if we were to have some kind of a blowout on the transmission line or well issues or something like that. I've built a 3-gallon ground storage tank before, and I gotta say they're really nice to have because it gives you some time to make a repair and things like that without running out of water in town. The new wells, that's a fairly good number for 2 new water wells. That includes the infrastructure and distribution lines between the wells, collection lines, road, power, everything you have to have. And we have a pretty good feel for that because we just completed 2 wells and they've been online for a few months now.
Brad, in the past, over the years, we've had discussion. I mean, we've eliminated a lot of debt in the city over the last 10 years. Y'all's view is that, as this chart on page 5, with the numbers of our debt deal. And the swimming pool, it kind of feels a different way because it's being funded through some LADC fees and stuff. Would you agree that there is a certain part of municipalities that need to have a healthy amount of some debt for infrastructure? I mean, that's a conversation that's come up in the past. I mean, for a city to be debt-free would be great, but not always necessarily practical. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir, and it's, it's cities, municipalities operate more on a pay-as-you-use approach, and, similar to large ticket items in your personal finances, like a house, financing is meant to fit within your annual budget. First off, so that you can afford it, make it affordable, but secondarily, with public finance and with governmental finance, the ideas that you want people that are there living in Littlefield and using the water system to be the ones that are paying for it. And so if you were to save up money to pay for this whole project over, maybe 5-10 years, and then do that construction project in 10 years, there's nothing, the people that help pay for that may move on, may not live in the city, from 10 to 20 years out when that project is actually being used. So it's for a couple purposes: to make it affordable and work within your budget, but also to pair the users of that water project with the people that are paying for it.
Makes sense. So we'll get out of the financial portion of it. The reason the $3 million gallon ground storage tank came about is our average use, our low daily usage is 1 million gallons, our high daily usage is 1.8 million gallons. So we have a 3 million gallon ground storage tank at the booster station. So we have approximately 2 to 3 days of water. The issues came is when we're pumping water 17 miles, and the issues with the 24-inch water line, when it's broke on a Friday, we ran out of water and had to go to Lubbock Water. One of our concerns in the future is Lubbock is starting to idle down the Bailey County field. We've actually turned it off several days a week recently. I don't know if they're still doing that. Do you know? There for a while they were only pumping it 2 days a week. So we wanted to have enough storage available in town where if we had a big break on a weekend or a holiday or something, that we had enough water if Lubbock Water wasn't available. Also, with aging infrastructure in town, as y'all have witnessed in the last year or two, when a big pipe bursts, it evacuates the system. Being able to have some additional water that's either isolated or can be used to not lose the town is the goal. So it's a very forward-thinking project to try to have plenty of storage to get through emergencies. But the reality is we've always had a cushion of Lubbock Water, but if Lubbock Water didn't exist, we have no water source close to town at 17 miles away. And then also the 2 new wells. We've added the 2 new wells. Mitch said this morning that by adding those wells, our ground storage tank is always able to be full now, even during those heavy usage, and keeps our pressures up. We don't have the air gaps and the things that have happened in the past. The water is going to continue to decline, and if we're going to do a big project, we don't need 2 wells right now. But if you'll notice in the growth of the water report over the last 5 years, is it substantially increases, and if Continental increases some building out there, then we're back in the same shortage. So one thing when we're talking about this, on this list on page 113, the lift stations are major deals. We've got them in really good shape right now, patched, but we're applying for grants for those. May want to see how those come out, or do a separate sewer project in the future. This dedicated water loop line to the milk plant, so what that would do is in conjunction with the 3 million gallon storage tank, because when we've lost the town, they've actually don't have any water either, and they've had to dump a day's worth of milk. And so with this 3 million gallon storage tank, is one of the deals is to have them a separate line that goes directly to them to be able to continue to supply. If we lose the town, we can isolate this 3 million gallon storage tank and supply the users out on 54, the industrial users, to keep them in production, because it's a big deal when they have to go down. That loop line, Mitch thinks that there's government, economic development grants, TDA grants for that. They are a part of our system. We have water lines to them. In my opinion, I think if we're going to do $1 million line project out there, they would need to participate in the cost of that, because it's basically a safety net for them. It's a assuredness that they will have water. So I mean, they would need to participate in that or get TDA grants or something too. They need to lobby with us to get grants to help with that. Because I don't feel like, even though they are a massive user of our water, I don't feel like giving them a secondary plan B contingency is necessarily 100% our responsibility. So, you know, out of this list, there's $3.9 million of wells and a ground storage tank that most definitely is what would be our focus projects. The lift stations, you could add one, add $500,000 to fix either one of them. But the reality is as you've all got your tax appraisal notifications in the last week, and with school bond, taxes aren't real popular right now. So, and taxes only affect a certain portion of the users of this. This is an enterprise use. It is strictly a water and sewer project. Therefore, the repayment of that needs to be to those users of the water. And that's where Brad's saying is that, you know, we can do a tax rate increase to pay for this, but the better option and more appropriate option for this project is probably tying it more to the utility rate, because it is for the utility. It's not like we're going out and paving a bunch of streets. That's a property tax deal. This is an actual enterprise fund that they're paying for. So we don't make a decision tonight. This is all for discussion, but you know, first off is, do y'all see value in any of these projects? All of them, some of them? What, as we look forward years down the road, what would y'all like to see happen?
Me personally, I think that, you know, we've been in discussion on this off and on for the last couple of years. And just like you have said, you know, with our infrastructure the way it is and some of the neglect that it had been put through over time because of past financial restraints, you know, this is something that, you know, we like I said, we've talked about that needs to be addressed. And I see, you know, in seeing our city grow and with the water usage of the Continental and the trailers, washouts and stuff, you know, I think that demand is going to continue to grow.
One industry you're not considering too, that you didn't mention, is the MTC is talking about doubling in size.
Absolutely.
So,
you know, I just think that, you know, this is something that
so mathematically, the average daily consumption per household is 120 gallons per day per person. So if they double in size over the next several years, like they say, that's another 1 million gallons a month. You know, 1 million gallons a month, it's a big.
well, I mean, that's another, I mean, you look at what we used this month, or I'll say last month alone was like, what, 44 million gallons, and it's going to keep increasing. This is definitely something, regardless of who's sitting in these chairs in the next, you know, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. I mean, I think it's wise to get the ball rolling on it.
So kind of what Brad and Mitch and Andrew, as I would task y'all with, being that, you know, this is more of an enterprise. Like Brad said, we want the users of these services to pay for these services. The milk plant is not under any contract to rate, are they, for years? The only contract rate we have so Sunnydale, correct?
Mm, yeah.
And so I'd like to explore next meeting, whenever it is, a month from now at least, is start putting together the spreadsheet that says, okay, we want to do $3.9 million of projects or $3.9 million plus a lift station, so $4.4 million worth of projects. Is if we do those, here's what our current rate structure looks like, here's what we have. You know, our base rates are pretty, I like our base rate, and one of this comparison means we need to pull the area, Mitch, you did this several years ago, of rates, Freona, Canyon, Hereford, Millshoe, Idalou, Shildwater. We need to get a sheet of what our neighbors are charging per thousand, or however they're charging. You know, our base rates, I don't really see us messing with our base rates much, but we need to maybe look at our gallons. It's going to be a balance between, if we're at $3.50 per thousand, maybe we have to go to $5 per thousand, which doesn't affect the average homeowner, minuscule. I mean, that changes, it doesn't change it because most of them don't go over 10,000 gallon minimum that's included in the base rate. So there's a lot of numbers to digest there. It's going to get paid by our bigger users, Continental and MTC and schools and some of those. We need to figure out what per thousand difference needs to be, what base rate change needs to be. It may be blended with a slight tax rate too, but I personally would like to see. The problem with the property taxes in rural towns is that there's only 1/3 of the town that pays property taxes, because the rest of them are under the exemption rate and everything, just because of valuation. And so it's not a good way to generate revenue, because it takes massive increases to generate money, which penalizes your commercial and homes. So that would be your homework for next meeting that I would have, is start getting a spreadsheet together with Brad of how much repayment capacity it's going to take, how much revenue. If you have to have a 10% increase to generate $4 million worth of repayment capacity, what does that look like?
Yeah, we can put I can actually do a plug-in number thing and see what the estimated revenue generation between base minimums per thousand water and sewer, and instantly see what the result would be in numbers, which is kind of a neat thing, but it'd be like an Excel sheet.
We've done that before. Andrew built a list like that.
He's got one now, I think. We're going to go through, check it out, see what it would do. They're a good tool to have.
But with that too, we want a comparison of our neighbors' rates. We don't want to be the highest in town. We will never be higher than Wolford or Shildwater. We don't want to be unproductive in that. Any other questions, comments? This is a discussion, and this is a big deal, so there's a lot of discussion.
So what we'll do is we'll work with a 4.4 million number.
If y'all agree with that?
I think so. I mean, me personally, you know, if we could, you know, on that 4.4 million, and I don't want to throw these numbers around lightly, you know, but and that's possibly, you know, throwing in a lift station, but and then still pursuing trying to get a bond for the other one. Is that correct?
Grant.
Not bond, a grant.
We're pretty, so we were really close last time we had that downtown going on, so some number kind of tossed us out of this CDBG. I would think we're really good candidate for it this year.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because I would like to see, you know, I'd like to see everything on this thing.
Yeah.
Because I know that Laguna lift station,
It needs fixed.
it is, yeah, I mean, they're all bad, but it always seems like in our reports, you know, there's always something going on with that Laguna lift station.
Laguna needs redone, and the main one needs redone, but Laguna's a priority. Would you agree, Mike? And then that loop line over the next month too is maybe explore with SPAG and stuff of what TDA looks like. I know the milk plant's pretty.
Oh, yeah, it should be really a prime candidate for a grant. It's called the Rural Business Fund now, RBF.
not sure, maybe part of this storage tank isn't part of that too. And
Could be.
And maybe getting them 1 million gallons of storage on site is part of it too. If they had their own 1 million gallon, then they'd be double, triple protected. But, you know,
Yeah, I think that's the name of the game, is many protections that we can get for reliable water.
All right, so we're done with that. Brad, thank you for your patience. That was a nice 52-minute conversation.
My pleasure, and, yeah, I understand our marching orders. We'll put together some revisions and work with staff to do that.
Thanks.
All right, good night.
Paul and Dave.
Oh, very good. So any other discussion on that before we move on? So good. Thank you for Mitch for getting all that put together and we'll continue to discuss that. We're going to go back up now that Eric showed up, and thank you, Eric. Sorry you're late getting to work, off work, but we're going to go back up to number 11. Consider an approved resolution waiving permit fees for Littlefield ISD bond project, and Michael is going to recuse himself because he's an employee of LISD, so he can't discuss or take action on this. So we needed the third person here to be comfortable with it. But Eric, the discussion is that, you know, as we talked about permit fees, if we're going to forgive for some, you know, what if a hotel comes into town or somebody builds a house that's real nice or an apartment or something, to just have a little uneasiness with subsidizing one government organization with another organization's obvious cost. I mean, we want to help the school whenever we can, and we give them stuff. We're about to discuss future, giving them a property, which they give us. It all trades out, but you know, helping each other out. But there is a direct cost associated with this. Would you agree, Mitch?
Yes.
So, I make a motion that we do not waive the permit fee.
I'll second that.
Motion been made by and seconded by Eric Squared. There any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carried. Next, we will consider and approve the transfer of the original town Littlefield Block 9, Lot 12 at 801 West 3rd Street to Littlefield ISD. And Eric, this is on your page. We broached the subject earlier. This is on page 77. There's a portion over there that's on one of the one-way streets by the school. They want the property. They're trying to keep that thoroughfare to and from the school kind of clean and possibly for future expansions. So that's on page 79, the property that we tore a property down there about 5 years ago, a house. And the motion, there's not a motion, the action before us is that we would like to give that property to the school to take care of. And once again, Michael's abstaining from this conversation and vote. Any discussion on that? Is there a motion to approve the transfer?
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of original town Littlefield Block 9, Lot 12, 801 West 3rd Street to Littlefield ISD.
I'll second that one.
Motion been made by Kenny, seconded by Eric. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, the motion carries. On the next one, 13, I'm going to recuse myself from this one, and because of conflict of interest also, so I'm going to turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem to go back. Kenny, it's all yours.
All right, well, item number 13, we're going to consider and approve a lease for 54 Arrow LLC to construct a private hangar at the airport. Mitch, you got some?
Okay, I followed the guidelines we set out, I guess about 6 years ago on the airport, and checked all the boxes. And this is investment in our airport, and we always consider these box hangars as a big plus because they allow us to house or base more aircraft. And the more aircraft you got, the more money you get from the feds. And we like grant money to airports, so this is a big plus for us. And now, I apologize on the contract you got in the packet. I mean, I clicked on the wrong file, and this is our standard contract that we use for leases on the ground underneath the hangar. And along with my request for you to approve construction of the T-hangar, there's also a lease that goes along with it. And we set up this system of leases for the ground of the hangars a few years back, and I've been negotiating with this company, and I really see their point. I mean, if they're gonna spend $150,000 on a hangar, you're gonna want more than a 3-year lease. So, and also, there's a practice that we've been following where we've been automatically renewing these leases without them having to give us written notice. And it's just difficult for somebody leasing the ground under a hangar to remember to send you a 90-day advance notice that they want to renew it. So basically, when they send us a check, we consider it renewed unless we want to. This new wording I've handed out to you just now states that the city will notify the leasee 90 days before the end of a term if they want to terminate the lease. Also, I want to maybe do, instead of one additional 3-year term, maybe give them the option for 4 additional terms, which would put it at about 15 years, which I think is plenty of a cushion for somebody building an airport hangar. And now this particular hangar, we looked at the plans and then they look good, and our engineer has sent in a site plan to the FAA, which is the requirement that we do for our airport layout plan. It sets where an old mobile home was that we demolished a few years back, so it should be plenty acceptable in location. It's right next to the Lowe's hangar. And anyway, that's kind of the overview of it, and I'd recommend that that you guys approve this lease and construction with the wording from this latest handout that I gave you that says may renew for 4 additional 3-year. We'll have to clean up the singular or multiples on that 3-year terms. But do y'all have any questions on that?
So you said this here was looking, I mean, just a private, I mean, the construction was like, what'd you say, 100 and?
Probably, I bet they'll have 110, 20,000 all total in it. The hangar itself, I think it's actually got the price on there. It's 80,000 or something for this hangar. Without the door.
Without the door, right?
Yeah, so you're looking about probably 80,000 minimum.
I mean, you know, we talked about this, about the airport and stuff, and we, you know, how we're trying to move the field forward and stuff. I think this, me personally, is just another step in the direction that we're wanting to go. And we're seeing some progress out there. Man, you know, this here could be another stepping stone for someone else to want to come out and build another hangar for their stuff. I
You know, that's the reward you get for cleaning up your airport and doing things right. You get people wanting to be based out of your airport. And the fuel, keeping it kind of reasonable, stuff like
Absolutely. Are there any questions or discussion on that? I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the lease for 54 Aero LLC to construct a private hangar at the airport with the recommended wording to the lease contract.
Second.
Got a motion and a second by Michael. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
One abstain.
One abstain, I'm sorry. One abstain. Got that, Jimmy?
Yes, sir.
Doing a good job, you want to continue?
No. I'm turning it back over to the mayor.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we've completed all those. Thank you, Eric, for coming. We're not going to be able to take action on those. Next, we will go to executive session discussion with an attorney regarding pending legal matters under Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with an attorney, the city council, and Mitch Wood.